Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for joining me today for our writing circle, Writing Your Introduction. My name's Kerry. I know some of you, but if I haven't met you before, welcome along. So this is just one of our writing circles where it's a series related to the thesis chapters. Writing Your Introduction is the first one, and then we'll go through the rest of the chapters through the semester. All right, so let's get started. Just to begin, QT acknowledges the Turrbal and Yagara as the First Nations owners of the lands where QT now stands. We pay respect to their elders, laws, customs, and creation spirits. We recognise these lands have always been places of teaching, research, and learning, and QT acknowledges the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play within the QT community. So today's resources are up on Blackboard. Actually, I don't have the link on me right now. I'm sorry. I have put the slides on Blackboard, though. You should all know, be able to get into Blackboard. It's just there in the writing circles, and you just need to scroll down a little to the introduction resources. And the recording, probably not today, but it will go up tomorrow afternoon. And you'll get an email with all of those links anyway. Oh, thank you in the chat, the Blackboard link. I usually do have it. For some reason, I haven't got it on me right this second. Thank you for that. All right, so this is a writing circle. We also do workshops. Workshops are giving the overview and theory and principles of an area of writing practice. We do activities in them as well, and you have that peer discussion in breakout rooms. Writing circles like today, interactive with exemplars, you're checking your own writing, and you still get your peer discussion as well. So today, the purposes of your introduction, some strategies about structuring, and just also some strategies we'll look at as well about flowing logically and clearly. So your introduction chapter is very important, of course. I will say chapter a lot, but even if you're at the proposal or confirmation stage and you're not writing a chapter, if it's a section or it's quite condensed in, still the same principles and effective writing that you need to do in there. Journal articles as well, of course, though, with journal articles much more smaller as well than a chapter, of course. And whichever thesis that you're writing, you'll still need a good introduction. Sorry, guys, just 1 second. Okay, and also, as we're going through the session today, there'll be some things or a lot of things that you already knew, that you already have a good understanding of. That's okay. The idea is to build your confidence and really highlight that you're on the right track, and hopefully also give you some good strategies that you weren't aware of that you can implement. So do you have your own draft writing handy? Your draft is for your own use. You won't need to share it. So hopefully you've got your document there ready to go. We'll also be examining exemplars and breaking into small groups to discuss your analysis. You'll see there's 2 exemplars today. Exemplar 1 is quantitative, exemplar 2 is qualitative. So when we get to that, which will be in the second hour, you'll choose the one that you'd like to analyze. So the exemplars are from ePrints, so you can also utilize ePrints as well. It's an excellent resource to find a thesis that you can use to sort of guide your structure and have a look at how people in your field are writing. So just to start you thinking, if you can write 1 sentence for each of these core elements of your study, just write them there in your notes. So what's your research problem? What are the research gaps? And what do you think the value of the research is? I'll give you a minute to do that. So this is like your elevator pitch. So it's important, especially when someone says, oh, what are you researching? It's really good to be able to summarize very quickly what it is you're researching, what's significant about it, and how you're going to bring value to your field of study. Now, just give it a try, see if you can write 3 sentences for this, and we'll actually come back and have a look at them shortly, but I will just give you a little minute to write those down. So today's session, you can see the purpose, the structure, the clear and logical strategies to make it for your introduction, and we'll have time at the end for a Q&A. Just really quickly as well, something that I get a lot of questions about HDR candidature and other training opportunities. It's all on HiQ. You can see there your candidature, everything to do with the administration of your degrees. You've got your training and workshops there is all the training available, obviously, engaging with industry about internships and planning your career. There's a lot of really great training available. So particularly engaging with industry and planning your career, no matter where you're up to in your candidature, go in and have a look and see what opportunities are there, because there are so many. And if you didn't already know, September 8 is Are You OK Day. QUT does a lot of activities and has a lot of resources around this. So I do have the information here. I'll pop in the chat. It is a really important day. It's actually, of course, important all through the year, but having a focus day just reminds us about the importance of checking in with people and saying, are you really okay? And listening to any issues that they're having. So there's the information about the actual Are You OK website there. And if you're interested in some of QUT's events, you can see that there. If it's you who's not okay, please reach out to someone for support. There's a lot of details there as well for that. If that's something that you need, please speak up, and you can see in those links I gave you. And in the chat, someone says the mental health first aid course is great. I also have done that course and I agree, it is great. And yes, challenging. But to be honest, I've already been able to utilize what I learned there a number of times, and I'm very grateful that I had that opportunity to access that training. Okay, so if you haven't entered your student ID as yet into the chat, could you please do so I can record your attendance? And let's have a look at the purpose of your introduction. Now, in the UniHub reminder email that everybody gets the day before you have a training session, I hope you do read those emails, because there's often important information that we want to tell you about, such as there's the resource on Blackboard. So in that resource, if you did go and have a look at it, it's a really good summary of you know, all the moving parts of an introduction chapter. And I wanted to actually ask you this poll question. Okay, so you can see there what makes an effective introduction chapter. The answers are, you're anonymous with the answers. Okay, so everybody answered both A and C. That's great. Now, obviously, sometimes these poll questions, the answers are quite easy. You know, it's not about trying to trick you or anything. And it's just to tweak your thinking and get you into the groove of keeping these sorts of things really clear in your mind, such as the fact that you know, an effective introduction chapter it needs to capture the reader's interest, of course, and it needs to tell the reader what's being investigated and why. So let's have a look at the purpose of the introduction chapter. So now again, as I said, depending on whether you're writing your final thesis or a research proposal, your stage 2, your MPhil, you still will need these aspects in there somehow. Okay, obviously they'll just be scaffolded, sometimes they'll be extended, sometimes it'll be more concise. But remember as well that your introduction is giving a really broad overview of the whole research. Okay, you really need to tell the reader everything that they're going to be introduced to and talk about in the rest of the document. So the introduction chapter really needs to set everything up. So if we think about all the different kinds of documents that you may be writing, do you really need to mention all of these things? Let's think about it. And what I want you to do now in your own draft is have a look at those. What have we got? We've got 6 dot points there. Have a look at your draft and see, firstly, if you have explained all of these points or at least given an introduction to them. If you haven't, do you think that you need to? Maybe you're not quite sure yet. So just I'll give you a couple of minutes to check your draft and have a look at those subheadings there. So what you're thinking about here is each of these subheadings or topics or parts of an introduction. Do you need it in your introduction? Do you already have it? Do you need to add it? And is there some things that aren't necessary because of the stage of candidature that you're already up to? So in the chat, I don't feel comfortable leaving out the research questions in the introduction chapter. They are in mine, just my view. Yep, agree. I'm pretty sure I had mine as well. We often see it, but we don't always see it. And that's what you can choose to do. You can put them in, and also don't forget your supervisory team will have a perspective about whether you put them in there as well. So this is it's one of those ones where there's potentially no right or wrong as to whether the research question should be in chapter 1. Let me just go to the next slide. So here's some more things that you'll need in. So I suppose research gaps and where the research fits within the field, they sort of go together, don't they? I'll give you another minute or so on these ones. All right, we're going to keep going. There they all are there again. So a lot, isn't it? The key is going to be dependent on, as I said, what stage of candidature that you are up to. Potentially some of these dot points here, maybe just one sentence, particularly talking about the research design in a proposal, stage 2, would just be realistically a sentence or even a few words in a sentence to let them know whether it's qualitative, quantitative. And again, the only one maybe not is the research questions, but as we've said, some people want to put the research questions in, and that's okay. If you're not putting research questions into the introduction, where are they going to go? That's the other thing. I mean, potentially methodology, maybe even lit review, but I probably wouldn't advise leaving research questions to a chapter 3 if that's what your methodology chapter is. So if you're thinking about it like that, then chapter 1 might be a place, or potentially the literature review, especially if you've used the literature review to formulate your research questions. Maybe then it would fit in there, but definitely something to think about. So a little bit of a recap then. The purpose of the introduction, you're setting the reader up with a broad overview of what you're examining, how you're going to do that examination, and why. What is it that's important? You know, why do we need this research? Also, you want to position your research very clearly within your field of study, talk about the gap as well. And ultimately, all of those things together are showing to the reader the value of your study. Don't make the reader wait. That's really one of the key things to take away from today, is that I know there's a lot of things that we just said that you need to tell the reader about. So you really need to do most of that very concisely in the first few paragraphs. Don't make the reader wait. We don't want the reader to get to page 4 and be like, I'm still not quite sure what's going on here. That's no good. We need them to be in those first sort of 1 to 2 pages, fairly clear, not of the details, but of the broad overview of what you're doing. So as the writer, you need to make that good initial impression. You need to engage the reader. This is your first chance to show them the value of the study and that you can lead them through in a clear and explicit way. You're persuading as well as informing. Never forget that. Yes, there's some descriptive elements in there, but you also need to persuade. We'll talk about that a little later on in the session. Persuade the reader to care about the topic. So right from the beginning, you are convincing the reader, hey, guess what, reader? I'm doing this fabulous research. And not only is this research important to all of these stakeholders, it's important to you as a person who's a researcher in this field. Someone in the chat has said they love that image. Yes, I love it too. It's a good one. So we come back, always, always. I'm going to say this again and again throughout the semester in every single session. It's always about the reader. Who are you writing for if not for readers, you know? So this is your opportunity in the introduction. And also remember that usually the reader doesn't know who you are. We've got to impress them and we don't make them wait. Poll question 2. Let's have a look. So no right or wrong with this answer. Depends where you're up to in your candidature, as I said, and it's just interesting to see what you're thinking about, because as I said, I really want you to always have in your head, you're writing for someone and you're hooking them in and engaging them and persuading them. All right, so we've got a couple of people saying examiners, a couple of people, most people saying anyone who reads my thesis. All right, great. So as I said, no right or wrong. If you're heading towards that sort of writing up final part of your candidature, what I would really want you to do is think about the examiners. Okay. Yes, anyone who reads your thesis. Yes, of course, your supervisors, and you will have seminar panels as well. They're important people too to be thinking of, but ultimately you're going to have examiners. So get into the shoes of the examiners as soon as you can, and thinking about the things that they're going to want. So let's have a look at what they want. So there's been a bit of research around this. There's a couple of really excellent research articles. This is one of them by Golding et al. So what they found was that basically by the end of the first few chapters, the examiners have judged the thesis. Okay, now, as always, we don't know where they're going to read it from front to back, but they often do. They might have a bit of a flip through certain chapters, but at some point they will read it from beginning to end so that they can see the flow and the structure all the way through. And by the time they get to the end of the lit review, they have judged what they think the thesis and the research is like. And also in the introduction, they're looking at figuring out, do you know what you're doing? Okay, so pretty important to show them that, yes, you do know what you're doing. Okay, and how do you do that? By demonstrating your critical thinking, by demonstrating your expertise in your field, and demonstrating the value of this research. Engage them, persuade them that they need to not only listen to what you're saying, but they should be very interested because it affects them. And also, of course, we can understand that they would become annoyed and distracted by errors. So again, that proofreading and making sure that you do all your draft work and work really hard to have a well-written introduction chapter. So this is a good little excerpt from the article by Golding et al. So they're saying the examiners will focus on the introduction and perhaps the lit review. As examiners read these, they're already deciding whether the candidate knows what they're doing. There is some inertia to an examiner's initial judgment. It can change. So if they judge at the beginning, yes, this is great, they might be more forgiving as you go through if they see things that they think need to be improved. Whereas at the very beginning, if they're already saying, ooh, I'm not sure that this person knows what they're doing, it could be very hard to persuade them through the rest of the thesis that you do know what you're doing. I'm sure you all know what you're doing, so we need to make sure that's very clear in these initial chapters. We don't want them to be reading more critically if they flag issues at the very beginning. So if the introduction is excellent, then they're going to be, you know, already engaged and into what they're reading. All right, so the structure of your introduction. Let's go into that part. So basically, the very broad structure is an upside down triangle. You're going from broad to narrow, okay? So you're going to start the introduction by very broadly explaining the topic, the problem, the background, context, aims, and significance, as we've already seen before. Then you'll narrow down into the more specific parts of the research, such as the gaps, the research questions, any theories, important definitions. And then at the end of the chapter, you generally give them an idea of the research design and the structure of the thesis. There might be some overlap with these, particularly depending on which part of your candidature you're up to. As always, consider the reader. This is a guide. All of those sort of dot points that I gave you before to check in your draft, again, always a guide. And, you know, thinking of scaffolding the reader, okay? If you go straight into, oh, here's the research questions before you've given them the background and the aims, that's not going to be a good flow or structure, is it? So really think about that scaffolding of the reader so that they are led through and can gain a deep understanding not only of your topic, but also where you're fitting within the field. So as I said, this is a good guide. It might help you to structure your drafts. So getting started, I talk about this idea a lot of figuring out how many words that you need that can help with that draft structuring. If you're doing a proposal, it might be 1,000 words. So would you have 3 sections at 1,000 words each? Probably not. Your introduction would potentially be the shortest section, wouldn't it? The same with a 10,000 word proposal, the same with the final thesis. Your introduction section is never going to be the longest. So it's hard to say exactly, but start to think about this. If you know you only have 1,000 words to play with, or even less, that's going to mean you have to be very concise and write in a very clear way as well. So final thesis, around 3,000 to 5,000 words would be a rule of thumb. If you have a few less, if you have a few more, depending on how that fits in with your whole thesis, it should be fine. but that'll just give you a bit of a gauge about how many subheadings you might need and how you need to fit in all that important information to scaffold the reader to understand what you're doing. So once you've got an idea of how many words, set up a draft structure. Doesn't matter if you need to change it later. Think of some draft subheadings. You can use those dot points that we looked at earlier. You wouldn't have all of them, of course, but have a think about what those notes that you put in about what you need. Maybe you can come up with some draft subheadings and some dot points. Make sure your subheadings are clear. Sometimes it's a good idea to leave yourself a little note as to why you have put a dot point or why you've put something in a certain order, because you will forget. And you'll come back and you'll think, oh, is that the right logical flow? Why did I do that? So leave yourself a note as to why you did it. So if you do come up with a better idea, you know that you've thought about it a lot and that you're on the right track. Of course, getting started, write those drafts and seek feedback. So here's some subheadings that you could utilize. Now, this is from that introduction resource on Blackboard that I gave the link for you before. Now, if you're writing, say, an MPhil proposal, you might not have all of these, okay? Of course, because it's so compressed. So probably this is something more for a final thesis. However, you could definitely be using these in a confirmation document, let's say. All right, let's look at some example subheadings. Now, if you can, write in the chat, what you notice about each of the examples. What do you notice about the structure, the length of the chapter, and the subheadings? So this is the two example table of contents for our two exemplars. So let's have a look. Quantitative thesis by publication. What do you notice there? It's quite short, isn't it? It's about, 6 pages long. 21, 2, 3, 4. Yep, 6 pages long. Maybe too short. Now, it is a thesis by publication. Whether that makes any difference, probably not. What about the next one? So it's about 10 pages, 10 or 11 pages. Now, these are both QT, from QT ePrints, remember? Yeah, so the second one has some more, more pages. Again, you know, everybody's going to be different. So just by looking at these examples, it helps you to go, okay, well, I think that's too short. I'm going to make sure mine's longer and has more detail in it. Okay, here's another one. This is one I sometimes use as an exemplar. It's a study into the dredging at Currumbin Creek on the Gold Coast. So still about 10 pages, but only a couple of subheadings there, isn't it? So that's a thesis from engineering at Griffith, that one. And here's another one. So this one, 4,500 words, quite a few pages actually. What's that? 16 pages. Something different in that one is the theoretical framework. So that's a question too, isn't it? Do you put, if you've got a conceptual or theoretical framework, are you putting that in the introduction or the lit review, or maybe both? So in this one, it's been introduced in the introduction chapter, and then it's discussed further in terms of previous studies and justification for using it. More details on that later on. Yeah, so interesting to put the framework. Yeah, agree. So a lot of decisions, isn't it? That's why you need those drafts and you need the feedback. So what about your introduction? Go in now, have a look at your draft. What do you think about your subheadings so far? Are they clear? Right. I know I've got something, I think I say a bit later, try to avoid subheadings that say just background. I guess it's obvious that it's the background to the study, but I just feel it's better to say background to the research rather than just background. I don't know. That's just me. You might think I'm a bit crazy. Yeah. Maybe you've got some other subheadings in there. Maybe you want to add some more. Again, remember, it's going to depend where you're up to in your candidature. If you're doing stage 2, you're not going to need very many subheadings at all, really. So just have a quick look through, think about your subheadings and think, do these seem like they're on track, or do I need to rejig them a bit? I'll give you a little minute. Okay, question in the chat. How do we differentiate research questions, aims and objectives? So your aims and your objectives are probably similar, but I have seen at times supervisors asking HDRs. So the aims are broad, okay, want to increase understanding and insight into something, whereas the objectives might be more concrete and explicit and relate to the recommendations that you're going to give. So depends field of study, what your supervisors are saying. And then of course, research questions should be linked specifically to achieve those aims and objectives. So there should be similar words in there. I hope that helps. So a standard for stage 2, please jump onto HiQ, where in the section on your candidature, there is some guidance around every milestone in there, and they've just been actually updated all the way that you process your milestones, and it's much easier. So have a look in there to see if there's a standard, and also double check, of course, your faculty or your school, because there's often guidance around what they want as well. Your supervisors should help, and also going into HiQ, the milestone section in your candidature on HiQ. All right, so structure is going to be flexible, isn't it? And you'll figure out what's best for you. Let's have a look at the strategies for the actual logical and clarity and the flow of the chapter. All right, so why is this important? Well, let's go back. Who's the important person? The reader, right? We need them engaged, and we need them to be reading, going, I see. Now, remember what we said in the introduction chapter. Of course, you can't tell them everything about everything. You're restricted with the number of words, but you can introduce all of the important parts and all of those moving parts within your research. Even if it's just briefly, the readers know that you can't tell them everything, and they know you're going to extend on it in the subsequent chapters. So we don't want them confused. We want them at this point to be very clear. This researcher is investigating this thing for this reason, and it's important for this reason. Okay, it's your job to engage the reader and lead them through. So one of the ways is the clear subheadings, which we've just talked about. Of course, the clear topic sentences. This is something I see all the time. There'll be a subheading, significance of the research, and then the first sentence says nothing about why the research is significant. There's no word significant in there. It's gone off topic. So that's just one example. So always make sure that the first sentence under your subheadings that actually refer to what the words are in the subheading. You can't have the reader confused at the beginning of a section or paragraph. That's not going to be good. Again, I keep telling you, don't make the reader wait. Those first few those first few paragraphs and pages are just so important. Even if, you know, maybe you'll do a couple of paragraphs in your final thesis just to give that sort of broad overview, then you'll have your subheadings to go in and explain further. Remember those core elements that we talked about at the beginning? I asked you to think about, didn't I? The value, the aims, and the gaps. They must be explicit and clear from the very beginning. And I want you to, in that introduction chapter, though, that flow is going to also plant the seeds, which we're going to look at as well in a minute as an effective strategy. So we're going to look at each of these topics in a second as we go through. Subheadings, right, we already looked at those. They're very important. They communicate the key ideas. You want to have your reader be able to look at your table of contents and have it shed light on what you've done, all right? That it's really important that the table of contents is very clear and it has a lovely structure and logical flow as well. So as often as you can in your planning time, check your table of contents and ask yourself, are the subheadings flowing? Am I building on each point? Am I scaffolding the reader and leading them through? Does the content in each section actually match the subheading? And as I said, maybe not background as a background to the research would be better in my eyes. The other thing I see a lot is in all chapters is a subheading that says introduction. So you have an introduction chapter or an introduction section. Doesn't really make sense to then have an introduction subheading, does it? It could be introduction to something, I don't know, the theoretical framework maybe, but yeah, try to avoid a subheading that says introduction. So topic sentences, lead the reader through, set up the main point. My advice with that is to use your voice for those first sentences in a section in particular, not a citation. Use the citation in the second sentence as evidence. Use your voice, because remember, you're demonstrating your critical thinking and your voice. So that's a really good time in that first sentence when you're setting up the main point. So we're going to look at some examples. Write in the chat what you think about these topic sentences. Are they okay? Do you think they could be better? Is there something you don't like or you do like? Let's have a look. So this one is from our exemplar 1. This is the very first sentence of the thesis. Chronic wounds, including chronic leg ulcers, are regarded as a silent epidemic that place a considerable drain on healthcare resources and affect a sizable portion of the world's population. Okay, what's that doing? That one, that sentence, very first sentence of the thesis. Yes, it's telling us the problem, absolutely. And it is starting off, this is the actual topic about chronic wounds and improving the outcomes of patients with chronic wounds. Yeah, I would agree, it is a problem. It is stating the problem. But I guess in some ways, as the reader, thinking, and remember, when you're the reader, there's no right or wrong, it's how you feel. It's basically right from the very start, but starting to persuade us that this is an important research issue. What about this one? So this is a qualitative thesis. This is again, first sentence. The study explored the academic expectations, academic socialization, and academic literacies experience of students with EAL during their first year at a university in Southeast Queensland, Australia. Thinking about ulcers is yuck. Yes, agree. Well, you're probably not going to choose that exemplar then. Feel like it should go towards the end. Are you talking about the first one that we looked at, I think, in the chat? I think you're talking about this, the bit about the problem, maybe. Remember, as writers, we make decisions all the time, all right? And I'm certainly, if you have a view, I've asked you for your view, and I'm never ever saying that what you're saying is wrong. Everybody's going to have a different perspective. Okay, example 2. So basically, this one's setting up exactly what's being investigated. So we know straight away what's happening. Maybe there's a better way, as always. This is just one example. And here's another example. This is exemplar 2. This study investigates the community of inquiry and its impact on academic functioning of students with learning difficulties. So again, setting up the topic, okay? So I think the first one we were sort of like, okay, this is starting to persuade us of the problem. The second 2 are more the topic. So again, you know, these are choices that you're going to make, and you through your drafting and seeking feedback. So let's go into our next activity. Have a look at your topic sentences, especially the very first sentence of your document. Do they set up the main point? If you're looking at that first sentence, is it setting up your problem or your topic and giving a really broad idea to the reader? If you have some topic sentences that are citations, then think about whether you could rejig this so that it could be the second sentence and you could put something that's your voice. I'll give you a minute. All right, let's keep going. So, key strategy for that introduction chapter: don't make the reader wait. At the very beginning, the topic, the aim, the research design, very broadly. This, like I said, it could be just one sentence. And also you generally give them in those first, give the reader in that sort of first paragraph, you let them know what's in the introduction. That's if you're doing your chapter, your final thesis chapter. Obviously, if it is stage 2, you wouldn't need to do that. So we're going to look at a couple more examples. So again, write in the chat what you think. I know there was a lot more that we said needed to be in there, but I've just pulled these 4 out because they'll fit with the examples we've got. So let's have a look. All right. So again, remember we already looked at that first sentence, the study explored blah, 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 blah. Then you've got, so I'm just actually going to put the things that we're looking for in the chat. So the topic, yes, check. Then sentence 2, the academic literacies approach was used as a theoretical framework. There's a definition for academic socialization and academic literacies. And then it goes on about what's in the study, what's in the chapter, sorry. So that's the first paragraph, all right? All right, you keep reading that. And then I'm going to show you the second paragraph. So we've got the research topic. We've got some key definitions. I don't know, what do you think here? I guess the idea of having sentence 2 and sentence 3 is to very quickly explain to the reader what these concepts are, because they're very important to the study. And do you think, well, you're the readers, do you think that potentially without sentence 2 and 3, if we save those till later, would the reader be wondering, oh, okay, well, actually, what does socialization and academic literacies mean? So I guess sentences 2 and 3 are addressing that, so the reader's on board and can go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. and then what's in the chapter. So that's paragraph 1. This is paragraph 2. The aim of this study is to add to current higher education research by investigating blah. Increased understanding is necessary because of these important things, and they're complex processes influenced by social, cultural, and contextual factors. Specifically for students with English as an additional language, transition means they need to understand, develop, and engage in unfamiliar literacy practices. So that would relate to socialization and literacies. Insights into factors which influence socialization and literacy experiences can inform ways to improve pedagogical decisions about curriculum and classroom practices. Okay, so the aim is there. Nothing about the research design as yet. Was there? No, I don't think so. So hopefully that would be coming up. Anything else in there that you think is important from what we were talking about, the things that need to be in there really early on? Remember what we're doing, we're making sure the reader doesn't wait. So there's a little bit in there about why the research is needed, and then there's a little bit about the implications. So, you know, you can see, can't you, even in 2 paragraphs, it is challenging to get all that important information in. So that's why your drafts and your feedback are going to be so important. So now check your draft and have a look whether those first sentences or the first paragraphs tell the reader these things. Have a little look now. I'll give you a minute. The main thing to be thinking about here is those initial pages. What have you got in there that you need? Tick everything off. There's, you know, even you can be putting information about the value as well, the significance. So as long as you're giving all that important information that you need to set up to persuade the reader that this is valuable research, and potentially just making sure that you haven't got things that can probably wait till a little bit later as well. Lots of decisions to make though, isn't there? So remember at the beginning, we talked about these core elements: the research problem, the gaps, and the value of the research. So again, why did we look at this? Because these are important information that needs to be in those early paragraphs. So have a look at what you wrote. And again, check your draft to make sure that those things are in there as well: the problem, the gaps, and the value. So we looked before, we wanted the topic, the aim, the research design, and also what's in the introduction if it's your chapter. Obviously not if you're in, and even in the confirmation you would, but if you're in a research proposal stage 2 or MPhil proposal, you may not need that sentence to say what's in the introduction. But have a look at your draft and check you've got these core elements as well. Okay, let's keep going. So a lot to think about, isn't there, to make sure that you've got all this information in those early pages. So why do we need all this early on? It's because your contribution is what's important, your contribution to the field of study and the value of the study. So think about what makes your research important and worthwhile, and we're going to start planting those seeds right from the very beginning in the introduction. So let's have a look what that means to plant the seeds. Poll question 3. Okay, in the context of an introduction chapter, what does it mean to plant the seeds? Answers are anonymous, and no right or wrong. Well, maybe one's wrong. Okay, so planting the seeds is really about B, to clearly introduce and explain a topic with the intention of persuading the reader to agree. So you're planting the seeds about what's going to come with your findings and the implications of your research. So we need to keep on keeping the reader engaged and in the loop so that they're thinking, oh yeah, this is important. Oh, we do need insight into this. The other thing is it demonstrates your deep understanding of the topic, and you're being explicit. By being explicit about the significance and the value of your research, that is planting the seeds for what's going to come at the end of the thesis. And it engages your reader and makes them want to know more. They want to find out what you found out. So planting the seeds keeps the reader engaged, and by writing your drafts and demonstrating your critical thinking and your deep understanding of the research field, and by helping the reader to gain a deep understanding of your study and seeking feedback to make sure that you've done that. So seeking feedback from readers to say, you know, is it clear what I'm doing, and why is the value of the research clear? And am I engaging the reader to make them say, oh, I can't wait to see what you found? So let's look at an example right in the chat. If you think that the example plants the seeds, let's have a look. So this is from our exemplar 1. Infection is a negative consequence of the interaction between the host and microorganisms in the inflammatory process. Infection occurs when the host is unsuccessful in defending against the microorganism's virulence. Challenges in the management and treatment of CLUs remain significant, as many do not heal for more than 6 months or even years despite current recommended treatments. Infection is suggested as a leading contributor of delayed wound healing. A primary concern is the infection can prolong wound healing and increase complications and mortality. Infection can also negatively affect patients' quality of life and increase the financial burden on the healthcare system and society. All right. Any seeds planted, do you think? What are you thinking? This is the introduction chapter, remember? What are your thoughts? Are we going to come up with some good insights in the end? Let's have a look. So there's a clear explanation of the topic in that first sentence. Notice as well the strong vocab, really important, a good strategy to make the value of your research very clear. A negative consequence, unsuccessful in defending, it's significant, it's of primary concern, all right? And we've got a clear problem. And so this is planting the seeds as to why this is important, or it's actually being explicit about why it's important. And then when we get to the conclusion and the recommendations and the implications, what we would expect is strategies to improve this situation and the management and the treatment and avoiding those infections. So a good example. So your draft writing is so important. Try not to edit as you write. Instead, go back and proofread. Separate your time out. This is when I'm writing. This is when I'm proofreading. Get really good at the proofreading process of your own writing. Try to leave it for a day. Then you'll have fresh eyes. If you print and read aloud, you will hear when something's not well written, and then you'll be able to make it better. So that draft writing process is so important, and making sure that the value, the significance, and the planting of the seeds is in there, and you've got a logical and clear structure. So seeking feedback, just so important. I know it can be scary, and sometimes you can feel worried about the feedback that you're going to get. Everyone who gives you feedback is doing it to make the readability better and to help you improve as a writer. So try not to take things personally. If your feedback is something that isn't as positive as you hoped, the feedback is about your writing. It's not about you as a person. So try to breathe and not be too worried, and take it on the value of that it's going to make the document better. In the chat, I don't edit as I write. It takes time to change that habit. Yes, I'm one of the worst at it. You can imagine. I want every sentence to be perfect before I move on, which is impossible, right? It takes a while to get it where you want it. And, you know, the feedback is going to help you get better at judging the quality of your work. So you'll improve your own drafts, of course, and also your ability to take action to improve the skills that you're recognizing from the feedback that you need to improve. So we do have HDR writing peer feedback sessions. I have those 2 to 3, well, yeah, actually 3 a month or so. The moment they're still via Zoom. I'm hoping to put a few on at the end of the year, sort of November, maybe face-to-face, if I think people might come. I'm not going to do hybrid. I'll do them as well as the Zoom. I'll keep the Zoom and we'll do some face-to-face. And basically these sessions complement all of the other offerings that we have in the writing program, because I'm telling you to write drafts and receive feedback. So now I'm giving you a way to get the feedback. Yeah, thank you in the chat. The sessions are good, enjoyable, and supportive. That's exactly how I want them to be. And I really enjoy the, you know, the satisfaction that the HDRs who are coming to the sessions are getting to improve the readability of their drafts. And I'm there with you. I'm there. I lead you through. If you're worried about whether you're going to be any good at giving feedback, I help you with that and give you a training resource that doesn't take very long and gives you a really good idea of the process, so that you can go in with your peers and feel confident that you have something to give, and then they can have something to give to you as well. All right, we are right on time. Can you believe? So very good. Now, I put the activity sheet in the chat. I hope you all got it. So basically, the exemplar that you select, you're going to read for the next 10 minutes, write some notes to respond to the questions. What I want you to notice is the language that's being used to inform and persuade about the problem, the aims, the value, transition signals, structure of the paragraphs, the flow, and then you're going to go into the breakouts to discuss with your peers. Please relax. There's no pressure. There's no right or wrong. And the reason why we're doing this is for you to practice being a reader, practice noticing and engaging with text and making judgments about the quality of the writing. Once you're in a good habit of doing that, then you can pull those skills and use them in your own drafts as well. All right, so peer discussion time. Why can peer discussion help you? I've put this in because some people aren't so keen. They get a little bit anxious about going into a breakout and sharing their opinions with their peers. What I would say to that is try not to be anxious. There's no right or wrong. Your perception as the reader is your perception, and that's okay. And, you know, by engaging with your peers, it'll really increase your understanding of the topic and, of course, your critical thinking and evaluative judgment. So please enjoy your breakout, and, you know, don't be too worried. The reader is always right. All right, so I'm going to pop you in now. All right, so hope you went well with your discussion. Just some final tips for us to look at. So some common mistakes that I see all the time one of those with the introduction, and here I'm talking about a chapter, is no introductory paragraph to lead the reader in. So you have chapter 1, introduction, and then a subheading, and then going straight into it. I would recommend a paragraph or 2 paragraphs just to get some of the important information there and to tell the reader what will be in the chapter. Then you go into the subheadings. The other thing is rushing in with information and concepts that haven't been explained and assuming the reader will know what you're talking about. We can't do that. So for example, we talked about this before, hypotheses or research questions right at the beginning. You need to lead the reader in and scaffold. As we said, we don't want them getting through the first few pages and saying, I don't know what's happening here. We do need some definitions generally, particularly definitions related to the title of your thesis. And the other thing as well is make sure what you say you'll do in the introduction that you do in the rest of the thesis, and of course in that chapter as well. Again, these are things I see all the time. So this is one of the reasons why you're drafting and getting your feedback, to avoid these things. Now, glossary of terms or a list of abbreviations, or both, depending what's sort of normal in your field, what your supervisors say. Usually they would go after the list of tables and list of figures. Just pop in your document now any keywords or terms you think you might need to, if you were going to have a glossary of terms. Now this I'm talking about your final thesis, maybe even your confirmation document if you're doing the PhD. So you can pop some keywords in there. I will keep going. Here's an example. Now notice the first sentence there, the operational definitions used in this thesis are provided below. Why would we need to do that? Remember, in some fields, there's different ways you can define different concepts, right? And sometimes we use theories or we use seminal researchers to support our definitions. So these would be the things you might think about putting in your glossary of terms. Make sure it's in alphabetical order is the other tip there. There's an example of a list of abbreviations. That's from our exemplar 1. You guys read exemplar 2. So again, alphabetical order. Let the reader know there's more coming. Now, this is something I probably wouldn't put in the first couple of pages because that's obvious that there's more coming. But nearing the end or the bulk of your chapter, introduction chapter, you may want to refer the reader forward. There's an example there. This issue is discussed in more detail in section 2.5, so that's lit review. Couple of things, notice the tense. Don't say this issue will be discussed, just stay in present simple, is discussed. Try not to use future tense in your final thesis unless you're talking about maybe some implications at the end. And don't do this too much. Find a nice balance. You don't want to constantly be saying, oh, go to this section, go to that section. That'll be annoying. Maybe just do it once or twice. And also make sure your supervisor agrees with you doing this. I have known some supervisors to not like referring forward and back. I think it is good because it helps the reader, but see what your supervisors say. And as I said, don't overdo it. You need a nice balance. And of course, your introduction and your conclusion are mirrors, right? Introduction starts the story, conclusion finishes the story. They have to connect. Anything you have in your introduction must appear in some way in your conclusion, all right? So try in the final thesis stage, try to go back and marry them up as best as you can. If you go back to your introduction chapter and realize that you found you had findings that you weren't expecting, you'll need to refer some way to that issue in the introduction. You'll need to add that in. And of course, in that final thesis stage, so if for your confirmation document or your proposal, you might have said, I will do this, I will do that. this thesis will do something, this research, take all of that future tense out, okay? And go to present simple, right? Because you have done these things, right? So takeaways for today: engage the reader, start the story, make a good impression, and make sure it's very, very clear as to why this research is needed and why your reader needs to know about it. Plant those seeds, and remember the idea of the conclusion and introduction being mirrors. Try to proofread them together. So you can see you might even structure them in a similar way, but almost in reverse. Your introduction, remember, is broad to narrow. Your conclusion will be narrow. This is what you found. Then you'll broaden out. This is what it means to the stakeholders. This is what it means to the field. All right, so that has brought us to the end of the actual session. As always, I have a feedback survey for you guys. You can use the QR code, or I can put the link into the chat. I always like your feedback if it can help me to improve the sessions. And I just want to let you know while you're doing that about a few things that are coming up that are very relevant for you guys. We've got our graduate research student showcase. You can see that's on the Thursday, the 15th of September. Please come along. It's online. Oh, I'm just going to put the link for you to register. It's a really great I actually don't have the link. You'll be able to put it into the system. Sorry, for some reason I have the survey link again. Okay, so yes, it's the finalists for QUT's 3MT and VYT, Visualize Your Thesis. Really good to see what everybody is doing and showcase of our QUT research. Next Monday, Career Competitive Connections and Networks, Literature Review Fundamentals, that's the workshop, and then there's a writing circle attached to that. And Wednesday is HDR Writers Wellbeing Lounge. It's a hybrid, it's face-to-face and online. All right, so any questions? Is there anything you wanted to check from the exemplar? I'm happy to send you an annotated version of the exemplar if you'd like that. Please email me. Oh, okay, so we've got a yes, please. Is that yes, please? Let's look at the exemplar. I think it is. Okay, let's do it. Okay, so looking at the exemplar, so you guys looked at the qualitative one, so sorry for making you dizzy. All right, so initial paragraphs and background. What did you think? Information about the research problem, information about the research aim. Let's have a look. Community of inquiry. Learning difficulties comprise an area of concern. Okay, so that's indicating a problem, would you say? And also in most school learning environments, okay, so that's sort of giving us an idea of the extent of the problem. So usually it's through intervention. So the intervention is an inclusive social learning method. So this is giving us a little bit about the research design, talks about the community inquiry. Now, remember, this is the very beginning of the thesis, bringing in a seminal author, I would guess, and other ones. Okay, so the kids are lacking these particular skills, therefore might have a capacity to positively influence. So that's a bit of a planting of the seeds, do you think? The hope would be that this is going to be a process that will help them. So there's the information about the overview. What else did we need to do there? Research aim. So research problem, it's still a bit vague at this point, isn't it? But we know it's about this area of concern for these children. So background. Now I asked a question as well, what you thought about these sentences here. Any thoughts?
Is it okay to quickly say something? Because we discussed, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Just had some computer issues, but it's fixed. One of the things that we discussed in the group is that this section does assist in understanding the aims and research, but not totally clear, but also it introduces a bit of reflexivity at an early stage. And I think, to me, because this is what in qualitative research, what I've been pushed to do, and others have as well. We're not used to writing that sort of why we're doing the research, but to me it didn't quite answer the question. But I think when I go back over and read the 3 sections as is, it's a little bit clearer. But I think they've written it not mechanically, but just like point, without actually saying, well, the research aim is, or the research question, or the research interest is, but it's there. Yeah. If that makes sense. I'm not sure.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely makes sense. And you're exactly right. So when we're thinking about these particular sentences here, who is that for? It's for the reader. And you're exactly right, is to start that thread and that idea, which will be going all the way through, about reflexivity, as you're saying, and being a qualitative researcher. And these are kids in this researcher's classroom or school. So starting to, and in the methodology section, there would have to be a whole lot of information there about the ethics and how exactly the strategy was implemented. So again, what we're seeing is there's a lot of stuff we need to tell the reader, and it is hard, isn't it, to get it all in those initial paragraphs, particularly when we look at this one, first paragraph. So, but we're getting an idea of the topic, and as the reader, we can go, okay, I'm getting it, knowing we're going to get more information later. So I would say, so we have some concepts were defined. Let's just have a quick look and get past these bits here. So here again, this is sort of linking to the aim again, isn't it, really, by saying, I want to explore why these children sometimes fail to understand and have these learning difficulties. Why children fail, and the researcher wants to seek to understand. This is interesting as well, isn't it? Being controversial. So not being an expert in this exact field, we can believe the researcher. They've got to look at this 1996. So these are the sorts of things that the examiner would be aware of, right? So they're talking to the examiner saying, hey, guess what? I'm an expert in this field of study, and I know that this is something that's been investigated and discussed for a long period of time. So it's starting to get us into the where does this sit in the research field? There's a good there about the term, and the research is the culmination of an ongoing interest. And then this is sort of alluding to the methodology. Yeah, so what you guys are saying is it took a few reads, but that is true, and the examiner may need to do that as well to pull out those bits, but it does read in a fairly nice way, and we can read it. There's really at no time, all for me, and I hope for you guys as well, where I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, and of course, look, I've left out these bits. This is the interesting one as well. Sorry, I'll just check what the questions were. Oh yeah, planting seeds and the value and the gaps. Let's have a little look and see what we can come up with. Yep, so we've gone back to broad again, and we're talking about some challenges. Okay. Yeah, social media, maybe a bit out of the scope, not sure where he went with those. Okay, so some justification for the method there. Yeah, okay, so giving an environment. So we could put a better word in there to say creates an effective environment, a comfortable, a safe environment where children can explore new ideas, which would be really important for them, right? And then we've got, right, so that's explicit, significant for 3 reasons, and then they're listed there. And then a little bit more of a justification there. So, you know, I feel like you're exactly right what you said, where we're getting it. There's not everything that we need, but you know, what is it? It's not really that many words, is it? But it's also, I guess, giving you a really good model of how it's going to take a little bit of time to really get that that structure and flow in those first few pages where the things you want to say are there, and maybe, as you pointed out, in a less sort of dot point way and in a more, you know, because we talked about transition signals. That was one of the questions, wasn't it? So, so you can see that it's hard, not impossible at all, and you will do this, but there is so many things to talk about. We went through it at the beginning of the session. I had a list of however many dot points. Now, some of those can be incorporated together, some of them not. Depends on where you're up to in your candidature. But the key thing is get yourself in the reader's shoes. Your reader will be the examiner, and posing those ideas of why it's significant, what's going on in the field so far. If you can do that very early on, that'll engage the reader, of course, and get them interested. And you're starting to plant those seeds to say, this is important research, and I'm going to come up with some great insight that will be beneficial for whoever it is that your stakeholders are. All right, so we have just about run out of time. Happy for you with any other questions in the chat. How much info we should write is tricky, not too much, but clear enough and still being engaging. Exactly. It's a balance, isn't it? So when you're writing those initial paragraphs and pages, keep that in your mind and just ask the question to your people giving you feedback. What do you think? Am I setting you up enough? Are you clear about where I'm going? Is this raising questions where you think, oh, I need to know more right now? You know, the readability, yes, of course, the reader will have questions and be like, oh, I wonder how you're going to do that. Oh, I wonder what those arguments are, or those contentious issues are. I can't wait to find out. You don't have to tell them everything. You're planting the seeds to get them engaged and wanting to know more. That's probably one of the key things you're trying to do at this stage. All right. Yeah, the first paragraph before section 1, is that the standard? Yes. So those, I don't want you to have chapter 1 and then a subheading in your final thesis. I'd love, if your supervisors agree, for you to have 1 paragraph, even 2, just to give a really good setup of what's going to happen. And again, the reader will know, all right, hey, I'm going to find out more about these things. You know, you're leading them through in that really lovely, clear, engaging way where you're piquing their interest to know more, because you can't tell them everything straight away, of course, but you're piquing their interest to know more. That's your goal. Awesome. Very good. Well, thank you all for coming. It's been really lovely. Even, you know, sometimes the small group actually works quite well, doesn't it? So very good. Any more questions? Nope. Super. Lovely to see you all. Thank you for coming, and I will see you guys again soon.